This is my true story. On my 70th birthday, I waited all day for a call, a visit, a smile. Instead, I got a text from my children. We're too busy this year. No dinner, no hugs, just silence. I sat at the table alone, my cake untouched, and I realized something. Love shouldn't be one-sided. That night, I opened my safe and made a decision they'll never forget. A week later, they got the letter that changed everything. But before I tell you what was inside that envelope, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I woke up early on my birthday. The house was cold and quiet. I sat up slow and looked at the clock. 7 in the morning. I thought maybe the phone would ring. It didn't. The room felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something that wasn't coming. I made coffee the same way I always do, 2 spoons of sugar, no milk. I carried it to the table and sat there, waiting. It was my 79th birthday. I didn't want gifts or cake, I just wanted to hear from them. I kept the phone beside me. I looked at it every few minutes. I told myself they might be sleeping in. People are busy, I know that. But a call doesn't take much time. A message doesn't take much love. I sat there for an hour. Then 2. The phone stayed quiet. I got up and made toast I didn't want. I tried to keep busy, but my mind stayed on them. I thought of my daughter. She always sent a card. I thought of my son. He used to come over early with the grandkids. They'd run through the house like sunshine. The house hasn't seen that light in years. By noon, the only sound was the ticking clock. I was starting to think maybe I mixed up the date. Maybe it wasn't even my birthday. I checked the calendar on the wall. It was right there. The red circle I made last week. I laughed at myself for hoping so much. Then the phone buzzed. I jumped. I thought maybe it was them calling. It wasn't. It was a text. 4 words. Sorry, Mom. Too busy this year, I stared at it for a long time. I didn't even blink. I read it again and again, waiting for something else to follow. It didn't. No emoji, no promise to visit later. Just that one line. My chest felt tight. I put the phone down face first on the table. I didn't want to look at it anymore. I didn't cry. I just sat still. I've learned that crying doesn't fix anything. It only makes the silence louder. I sat there for a while, not moving, not thinking. The house felt smaller. The air felt thicker. I could hear my own breathing, and it sounded lonely. I walked to the window and looked outside. The street was quiet. The snow on the lawn hadn't been touched since last week. I thought maybe a car would pull up. Maybe one of them would surprise me. Nothing. Just empty road and cold air. I stayed there until my legs hurt. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I didn't need anyone. I told myself lies so I wouldn't feel what I was feeling. I made a small bowl of soup, sat at the counter and ate it alone. The spoon felt heavy in my hand. The taste didn't matter. I could barely swallow. Birthdays used to mean something in this house. Balloons, cake, laughter. Now it was just a date. Another reminder that I'd given everything I had to people who couldn't give back one phone call. I looked at the old photo on the wall of all of us together. My husband was still alive then. He was smiling, proud, surrounded by family. I could almost hear him say, "They'll come, just wait." But he was wrong. The world changes when you get old. You stop being needed. You stop being remembered. The sun went down before I noticed. The day had passed without anyone knocking, without anyone saying my name. I turned off the light and sat in the dark for a long time. It wasn't anger that sat with me. It was the truth that I didn't matter to them anymore. I used to, but not now, not enough to call. I went to bed early. The bed felt too big, too cold. I closed my eyes and told myself I'd stop expecting things, but a small part of me still hoped that tomorrow they'd remember. That hope hurt more than the silence. I set the table anyway. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. I pulled out 4 plates like I always used to. 4 forks. 4 glasses. My hands moved on their own. The same routine from years of birthdays that felt like home. The table looked full, but it wasn't. It was just a picture of what used to be. I stood there looking at it for a long time. The chairs were empty, but I could still see them sitting there in my mind. My daughter talking too much, my son laughing too loud, the grandchildren fighting over the corner seat. I could hear them if I closed my eyes long enough. For a second, I almost believed it was real again. Then I opened my eyes and saw nothing but still air and quiet walls. I made a small sandwich just to keep myself busy. Bread, butter, one slice of cheese. No cake this year. I didn't have the energy for it. I sat down and ate it slow. The bread was dry. It stuck to my throat. I reached for the water, but even that tasted like nothing. Food doesn't fill you when your heart's empty. I looked across the table again, 4 plates waiting for people who weren't coming. I could have put them away, but I didn't. It felt wrong to clear the table so soon. I let them stay there, like a quiet memory holding its place. I thought of the years before, when the house was loud, when birthdays meant laughter and candles and wrapping paper all over the floor. I remembered the smell of chocolate cake, the sound of my husband's voice singing off-key, the way the kids laughed until their stomachs hurt. Those memories felt warm then. Now they just burned. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the ceiling. I counted the cracks in the paint just to keep from thinking too much. The silence was thick. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the clock ticking behind me, the faint wind outside, all the sounds of a life that's still there, just quieter. I looked at the candle box on the counter. Small white ones, half used. I thought about lighting one. I did it without thinking. I placed a candle in the middle of the table and lit it. The flame flickered weak, just enough to light the plates around it. I stared at it, thinking about all the times I had made wishes. I had wished for health, for happiness, for more time. This time, I had no wish left. The candle burned, but I didn't blow it out. It went out on its own after a while. I sat there until it did. The smell of the smoke stayed in the air. It smelled like endings. I stared at that small line of gray rising from the wick until it disappeared. It was quiet again. The house always goes quiet too fast. I picked up the plates and washed them one by one. The water was hot and the steam hit my face. It almost felt like warmth, but not the kind I needed. I stacked them back in the cabinet, clean, unused, and closed the door. My hands trembled when I turned off the light. I stood there for a while, in the dark kitchen, thinking about what it means to grow old. You spend years building a family, keeping everyone together, and one day you realize the house that held them doesn't matter anymore. They have their own walls now, their own tables. You become a picture on their shelf, something they remember when it's convenient. I walked to the window before going to bed. The sky was dark, snow starting to fall. The world outside didn't care what day it was. I watched it come down slow, soft, and endless. The kind of snow that covers everything without asking permission. I turned away from the window and looked at the table one last time. The single candle sat burned down to nothing. 4 empty chairs. 4 ghosts of what used to be family. I turned off the light and whispered to myself that I wouldn't do this again next year. But I knew I would. Some habits don't break. They fade slow. I sat by the window the next morning with my coffee. It was cold before I even took a sip. The air felt heavy. The table was still clean from the night before. No crumbs, no plates, just an empty space where family used to sit. I didn't bother setting it this time. There was no point. I sat in the chair and looked at the wall instead. The pictures were still there, smiling faces. All the birthdays, graduations, weddings. I had framed each one myself. Now they looked back at me like strangers. I thought about the years when I gave them everything I had. Not just money, but time, strength, care. I worked 2 jobs when they were small. I skipped meals so they could eat. I stayed up at night when they were sick. I made sure their shoes fit and their clothes were clean. I didn't ask for thanks. I just wanted them to be okay. That was all a mother wants. Later came the big things: college, weddings, cars, bills. I helped with all of it. I never said no. I took from my savings to give them starts in life. Every time they said they'd pay me back, I said, "Don't worry about it." I meant it. I thought love would come back on its own, but it doesn't always work that way. People forget what you do when they think you'll always be there. They start to expect it. They start to believe it's owed to them. I didn't see it happening until it was too late. One day, I was the person they called for help, and the next, I was just another number in their contact list they scrolled past. I remembered all the times they said, "We'll visit soon." Soon never came. There was always a reason: work, kids, traffic. The world full of excuses that all meant the same thing. They had moved on, and I wasn't part of that life anymore. I told myself it was fine. I told myself they were busy. But busy doesn't stop you from caring. Busy doesn't erase love. I looked down at my hands, the skin thin, the veins showing. These hands used to hold them when they were small. Used to braid hair, pack lunches, clean up after spills, patch scraped knees. Now they just sat still on the table. All that work, all that care, and in the end, I couldn't even earn a phone call on my birthday. I thought about their weddings, the money I gave, the smiles, the speeches about family and forever. I thought about the houses they bought with my help, the cars parked in their driveways that I paid deposits for. I thought about how proud I was of them then. I didn't do it for thanks, but I did hope they'd remember someday. They didn't. They remembered until they got what they needed. After that, I became quiet history. I remembered the holidays, too. I used to cook for hours. Big meals, big gatherings, the smell of food, the laughter filling the rooms. Then slowly, one by one, they stopped showing up. First one couldn't come, then another, then none. I told myself it was fine. I told myself maybe next year. Then next year came and went, and I stopped setting extra plates. I stopped cooking too much. I stopped believing the door would open again. It hurts when you realize you built a life for others, and when you finally sit down to rest, no one's there beside you. The memories that used to make you smile start to sting. Every gift you gave becomes a reminder that you were worth more to them when you were giving than when you were just living. I picked up the photo frame from the shelf and looked at my husband's face. He had been gone for years, but I could still hear him saying I spoil them too much. He was right. I did. I gave them everything because I didn't know how to do less. He would have been angry seeing me sitting alone now, not because of them, but because he always said I needed to save something for myself. I never did. I set the frame back down and wiped the dust from it. My reflection showed in the glass. Old eyes, tired eyes. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for this. What I felt wasn't new. It was the same quiet ache that lives with me now. It doesn't shout. It just stays. I finished my cold coffee and stood up. The house looked the same, but something inside me had changed. The hurt had settled into something stronger. It wasn't anger yet. It was understanding. Understanding that love without respect is just a habit people forget when it's inconvenient. That night I couldn't sleep. The house was too. Every sound felt loud. The clock ticked. The heater hummed. The wind moved through the old windows. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything I had done for them. Every year, every sacrifice, every piece of my life spent keeping everyone else standing. I wondered what was left for me now. The room felt smaller the longer I stayed there. I got up, put on my robe, and walked to the living room. The house looked different at night. Shadows on the walls, soft light from the street coming through the curtains. I looked at the corner near the bookshelf. The safe was there, the same one my husband bought decades ago. We used to keep papers there. Important things. Birth certificates, house deeds, insurance forms. It had been years since I opened it. I walked toward it slow. My knees hurt, but I didn't stop. I bent down, brushed the dust off the top, and turned the dial. My fingers remembered the code even though my mind had almost forgotten. When the lock clicked, the sound echoed through the room. I opened it. Inside was my life on paper, old folders stacked neatly, letters, receipts, titles, bank documents, things people forget you own when they stop visiting. They think because you're old you have nothing left. They're wrong. I looked through everything one by one. I saw the house deed, my name printed clear. I saw the car title. I saw the savings account documents. There was more than I remembered, more than they probably assumed. I sat down on the floor with the papers spread around me. I thought about how much of this had gone into their lives already, how many times I pulled from these accounts to save them from mistakes they never learned from. How many times I said yes when I should have said no. I started to realize something I hadn't before. They only saw me as a safety net, not as a person, not as their mother, just as something to fall back on. I found a small photo in the back of the safe, me and my husband on the day we bought this house. We were smiling, young, full of plans. He used to say this house would take care of us when we got old. It did, in a way. It gave me walls to sit inside while everyone else forgot I was still here. I ran my finger over his face in the photo. I missed him more in that moment than I had in years. He would have told me what to do. He always knew what came next. I looked back at the papers. I thought about what they were worth, not in money, but in meaning. Everything here represented a lifetime of work, a lifetime of choices. I realized I didn't want any of them to have it anymore. Not after the way they had turned their backs. It wasn't anger that came over me. It was clarity. I wasn't going to punish them. I was going to make things fair. If I was alone in life, I could choose who I left behind in death. I stacked the papers neatly and put them back in the safe. Then I took out one envelope. It was the old will, the one I made years ago when I still believed love and loyalty were the same thing. I looked at the signatures. Their names lined up neatly, each one printed bold and entitled. I held it in my hands for a long time. Then I folded it once, slow and calm. The safe door stayed open as I sat there. The cold air from inside touched my face. I felt something steady inside me for the first time in days. Not pain, not regret, just control. It felt strange after so long. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew this much. The next time I touched that will, it wouldn't look the same. I closed the safe, turned the lock, and stood up. My knees cracked. I turned off the light and walked back toward the bedroom. The papers, the numbers, the power, they were still mine. The world outside could forget me. My family could too. But they were still living in what I built. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the light on, a pen beside me, and a stack of papers from the safe. The clock ticked loud on the wall. I could hear the sound of it in my bones. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt done, the kind of done that comes when you stop expecting people to change. I spread the papers out and looked at my life written in ink. Every number, every deed, every account, all under my name, all still mine. I took the old will out of its envelope. It looked worn, yellow around the edges. I read through each page slowly. Every sentence, every name, every promise I made on paper. Each one felt heavier now. They didn't deserve any of it. Not the house, not the money, not the land. They had already taken everything that mattered. They took love, time, respect. What else was there left to give? Nothing. The pen sat still on the table. I looked at it for a long time. I didn't want to move too fast. I wanted to be clear about what I was doing. I wasn't acting out of anger. It was peace, the kind that comes when you finally accept what's true. I thought of my husband again. I could almost hear him saying, "Do what you need to do." So I did. I started with the will. I crossed out the names one by one. My hand shook a little, but I kept going. Each line that disappeared felt like a weight lifting off my chest. When I was done, the page looked clean again, empty space where their names used to be. I wrote new ones, not family, people who earned it, the nurse who checks on me, the neighbor who brings groceries in the winter, the church that still sends cards, the few who remembered I existed without needing something from me. I wrote their names carefully, each letter steady. I signed the bottom of the page and dated it. I didn't feel revenge. I felt quiet, like the air after a storm. I folded the new papers and sealed them in a fresh envelope. I labeled it Final Will. I placed it in the safe, where it would stay until someone else found it. Then I opened my checkbook. I looked at the accounts. I thought about the ones I had opened in my children's names over the years. I had kept those alive out of habit, out of hope that maybe one day they would need help again and come to me. That hope was gone now. I closed each account on the list, one by one, writing the cancellation notes. It didn't hurt. It felt right. When I finished, I looked at the clock. It was past midnight. The whole house was dark except for the kitchen light. The air was cold. I picked up my pen again and wrote a short letter to go with the will. Not a message, just a statement. This is my choice. No one took it from me. I gave all I could. This is what's left. I signed my name and dated it. I sat there a while longer, staring at the papers. The quiet in the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt honest. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't pretending to be okay. I was okay in my own way. The truth was, I had spent too much of my life giving everything to people who didn't look back. Now I was keeping something for myself. I gathered the papers, stacked them neatly, and put them back in the safe. I locked it again, slow and steady. The click of the handle sounded final. It didn't sound like anger. It sounded like peace closing a door. I stood up, turned off the kitchen light, and walked down the hall. My reflection in the window looked older but lighter somehow. I didn't smile, but I didn't frown either. I just looked at myself and nodded. It was done. The decision had been made. When I got back to bed, I pulled the blanket up and closed my eyes. The sound of the wind outside was soft. I thought about my birthday, the text, the silence, and everything that led me here. It didn't hurt anymore. It just felt finished. The next morning felt the same as every other. Cold light through the curtains, quiet floors, the smell of coffee that filled an empty room. Nothing had changed around me, but something inside me was different. The waiting part of me was gone. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look for messages. I just sat and drank my coffee, one slow sip at a time. It tasted better when I stopped expecting it to be shared. The week went on. I moved through each day the same way I always did. Laundry, dishes, reading the newspaper even though most of the names meant nothing to me anymore. I saw their pictures online by accident. Someone had posted a family dinner. Laughter, candles, happy faces. None of them looked like they missed me. I didn't feel jealous. I felt strange calm. I had done what I needed to do, and now they were living their lives without a clue that theirs had already started to change. Each morning, I opened the curtains and watched the street. The mail truck came, stopped, left. The world didn't care about the small decisions made in a quiet house at midnight. It just kept turning. I liked that. The silence between me and them felt easier now. No more pretending, no more hoping. I cooked for myself again. Simple meals, soup, toast, eggs. The house smelled like it used to before everyone filled it with noise and mess. I walked through the rooms and noticed how peaceful they were now. No shouting, no rushing, just stillness. I used to hate that sound. Now I liked it. It was honest. I went through more papers during the week. I checked every account, every document, making sure everything was in order. I called the lawyer once just to confirm the changes were filed. He said everything was done. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't tell anyone else. It wasn't a secret. It was just none of their business anymore. The days were quiet but steady. I thought maybe I'd feel guilt, but it never came. I thought maybe I'd want to undo it, but I didn't. When you give too much for too long, you start to forget what fairness feels like. Now I remembered. Fairness doesn't mean giving everything away. It means stopping when people take too much. I watched them from afar in small ways. Photos, posts, little updates that made their lives look full. They went to dinners, they traveled, they smiled for cameras. I wondered if they ever thought of me. Probably not. People like to remember what you gave, not what you needed. At night, I would sit by the window and look out at the snow. The street was empty most evenings. Sometimes a car passed, sometimes nothing. The world outside kept moving, quiet and sure. I felt like a part of it again, not like someone left behind. The week moved fast after that. Every day I woke up with less weight in my chest. I didn't wait for calls. I didn't stare at the phone. I didn't wonder if they'd show up. I already knew the answer. They wouldn't. And that was fine now. I had given them too many chances. This was the first time I had given something back to myself. By the end of the week, I felt ready for whatever came next. The will was signed. The papers were filed. The safe was locked. The truth was written. All that was left was time to let life take its course. The seventh morning came with a different kind of quiet. Heavier. Still. I woke before sunrise and sat by the window. The sky looked pale and soft. I didn't know what day it was until I saw the mail truck stop in front of their houses down the street. I knew what was coming. The lawyer had said a week. Today made a week. I watched the truck go from one house to another, dropping envelopes, driving off slow. I imagined the sound of the knock. I imagined them opening the doors, finding the brown envelopes marked with legal seals. I could almost hear the confusion in their voices as they read the words. The will had been filed. Their names were gone. I didn't move from my chair. I didn't need to see it. I had already seen it in my mind. I pictured my son first. He'd opened the letter fast, thinking it was something else. Maybe a check. Maybe a notice about the house. Then the look on his face would change. Then my daughter, reading the same paper, her hands shaking, disbelief turning to anger. They wouldn't understand. Not yet. But they would. The mail truck left, and the street was quiet again. I sat there, the sunlight creeping across the floor. My coffee was cold, but I didn't care. I felt steady. I wasn't proud. I wasn't sad. I just felt settled. What was done was done. The world was finally even. Later that afternoon, I saw a car pull up outside my house. It was one of theirs. They didn't come to the door. They just sat in the driveway for a few minutes and then drove away. I didn't move to stop them. I didn't wave. I just watched. Some truths you have to face alone. The phone started ringing by evening. It rang again and again. I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail every time. I didn't need to hear the panic. I didn't owe anyone comfort. For years I gave and they took. This was the silence they earned. When night came, I made tea and sat in my chair. The house was dark except for the small lamp beside me. I thought about the word, will people think it's about money? It's not. It's about choice, about power, about who you trust with what's left of you. For the first time, I had used mine for myself. I went to bed that night without fear, without regret. Somewhere down the street, they were reading those letters, arguing, crying, blaming each other. I didn't have to see it. I could feel it, and I felt nothing but calm. The next morning, the calls came faster. I woke to the sound of the phone buzzing nonstop. I didn't answer. It kept going all day. The messages filled up the machine until it stopped taking more. I let it. I walked through the house and went on with my day. By afternoon, I turned the phone face down. I didn't want to see their names. I didn't need to hear excuses or promises. They had years to speak to me. They chose a text. Now they could talk to lawyers. I knew what was happening on their side. Panic, anger, tears. They'd call banks and get bad news. They'd try cards that no longer worked. They'd check accounts that no longer existed. Everything they thought they had was mine again. It wasn't spite. It was fairness catching up. By the second day, they were calling from different numbers. I didn't pick up those either. I didn't block them. I just let them echo in the house, each ring another reminder of how loud guilt sounds when it's too late. Neighbors said they saw arguments at their houses, raised voices, slammed doors, everyone turning on everyone else. They didn't know how deep the changes went yet. They thought they had time to fix it. They didn't. The papers were already filed, the signatures already sealed. I watched it all from the quiet safety of my window, not with joy, just with understanding. People don't value kindness until it stops being given. They don't notice peace until it belongs to someone else. When I went to bed that night, I left the phone in another room. I didn't want it near me. I didn't need its noise in my sleep. I had found a different kind of peace, one they could never buy back. The snow started falling the next day, soft and slow, covering everything in white. I sat by the window with my soup, watching it build layer by layer. The phone was still silent now. They had stopped calling. Maybe they finally understood. Maybe they realized there was no way back. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad either. I just felt quiet inside. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I wasn't hoping for someone to come. The stillness felt good. I ate my soup and watched the snow fall. It was simple, peaceful. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed now and then. The mail truck came and went. Life continued like nothing had changed, but inside this house, everything was different. For once, I wasn't the one left behind. I was the one who had moved forward. I turned off the phone completely that night. No more buzzing, no more noise, just peace. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat in the old chair by the window, the soup still warm in my hands, the snow still falling outside. I thought of my husband again. I hoped he'd be proud. I knew he would be. That night I slept deeper than I had in years. Morning light came slow through the curtains. The snow outside was thick, untouched. I made coffee and sat at the same table where I had waited on my birthday. This time, I wasn't waiting. I just sat and watched the steam rise. They left me alone on my 70th birthday. I left them alone for the rest of their lives. No fights, no explanations, just silence. They taught me how it feels to be forgotten. I taught them what it means to lose what they never valued. I finished my coffee and looked around the house. It was quiet but not empty. It felt like mine again. Every corner, every chair, every picture still standing in its place. The world outside didn't know what happened. Only the people who needed to learn the lesson did. I went to the safe one last time, opened it slow. Everything was there. Papers stacked neat, my signature clean at the bottom of each one. I closed it again, locked it, and smiled a small smile. Not joy, just peace. They would rebuild. They always do. But they would remember this. They would remember the day they chose a text over love, and the day love stopped giving. I walked to the window and looked at the snow. The world was quiet, calm, fair. I whispered the truth out loud, not to anyone else, just to myself. They sent me a text. I sent them a lesson, signed, sealed, and legal. Then I turned away and went on with my day.